Hey folks, Jackdaw here. Over the past 2 Dragon Age days, BioWare have celebrated the fan-made event by releasing individual short stories paving the way for the next Dragon Age game's narrative. And today I am finally collating 2020 and 2021's short stories together, exploring, dissecting and tinfoiling each of the 6 short stories, analysing their characters and their plot's potential involvement for the next Dragon Age. This is an exciting, long exploration that is teasing aspects of Dragon Age 4's narrative and its characters. As a warning, there are plenty of Tevinter Nights spoilers ahead, so beware and keep that in mind if you haven't read Tevinter Nights just yet. Anywho, without further ado, let's kick this off with the first story. The next one, by Brianna Batty, explored a Grey Warden standing his ground against the dark. Now, before I break the next one down, we've actually already met one of the main characters of this story, that being Grey Warden Evka Ivo, who was introduced in the Tevinter Nights story, Hunger. If you haven't read Tevinter Nights, or just in case you need reminding, throughout Hunger, we discovered that Evka Ivo is a dwarf born and raised in Orzammar. She is, unsurprisingly, a profound member of House Ivo, one of Orzammar's many noble houses. Evka has been living on the surface as a Grey Warden for 3 years. During the events of Hunger, Evka was following orders directly from Fortress Weishaupt, the Grey Warden's headquarters, to escort new Grey Wardens to the fortress. Evka was partnered with a newly joined elf warden called Antoine. The pair stopped in a supposedly cursed village called Eichwell in the Anderfells, where many of the townsfolk had recently started disappearing. The 2 wardens agreed to help save the villagers and uncover the town's mystery. They discovered that a wayward son of a noble who was kicked out of the town for poisoning a chantry brother starved in the woods, which attracted a hunger demon. With this hunger demon's influence, the noble's son turned into a werewolf and started preying on the townsfolk. As Evka and Antoine confronted the werewolf, Antoine was bitten by the beast before it was slain. With the werewolf defeated, the pair believed that the curse of this bite was also null. Having saved the town, they both headed to Fortress Weishaupt victorious and no detours this time. The Dragon Age Day 2021 short story, Won't Know When, revealed the 2 wardens holding hands together, offering an official look at the 2 characters and their romance. I'll touch on that later, of course, but for the moment, let's talk about the next one. The next one revealed Evka Ivo's recruitment to the Grey Wardens, so we can assume that the next one is set at least 3 years before Hunger. The story started with Grey Warden Lawrence in the Deep Roads embarking on his calling, the end point in a warden's life where they avoid succumbing to the taint by entering the Deep Roads and killing as many darkspawn as possible before dying. While exploring the Deep Roads, Lawrence heard the yells of a dwarven woman from afar, Evka Ivo. He found her on the wrong side of a cave holding a blacksmith's hammer against a 2-mouthed blighted beast. Lawrence drew his sword to the beast. It had barbed teeth and crusty drool. It lunged at Lawrence as he defended Evka with his life. As Lawrence fought back, the blighted beast stabbed him. Evka hollered as Lawrence began to feel the pain of his wound. Evka ran towards the beast and cracked its head as hard as she could with her hammer. The beast's heart found Lawrence's sword and fell to the ground. The 2 ventured forth. Lawrence promised to get Evka out of the Deep Roads. They both walked through the dark as Lawrence's pain started to catch up to him. He was bleeding, but it was fine, he told himself. He needed to rescue Evka. Lawrence knew the way out. He just had to get there. But the pain. He began to stumble over his words. He doubted if he could even save Evka. Evka said that if he saves her, she'll save the next one for him. Lawrence smiled, agreeing to this deal. Suddenly, ghouls scrambled towards them both. Lawrence was too weak to fight, but he made a deal. Get Evka out and she'd save the next ones. In a flash, the ghouls were dead, defeated by a spirit of perseverance inside Lawrence. Lawrence's perseverance to save Evka was so strong that he attracted a spirit of perseverance that fought on his behalf. Evka ordered the spirit to release Lawrence and to tell him that she'd save the next ones. Lawrence's body fell to the ground as the spirit released him. Evka clutched his armor crest and closed Lawrence's eyes. She promised that she's got the next ones. That marks the start of Evka's journey as a Grey Warden and the end of this short story. A beautiful and heartfelt origin for our Orzammar friend here. The artwork of this story featured Grey Warden Lawrence fighting this horrifying blighted brute with two mouths. Nothing much to explore, however it's a beautiful, eerie piece. Like I said before, we'll talk much more about Evka in the final story. But moving to the next one. Ruins of Reality by John Dombrew regarded elves discovering something has gone wrong in Arlafan Forest. Just like the next one, Ruins of Reality featured characters portrayed in Tevinter Nights. Both Strife and Irulen from Three Trees to Midnight appeared in this short story, acting as a sequel to Three Trees to Midnight. Just to catch you all up to speed, in Three Trees to Midnight, Strife was described as a tall Starkhaven elf with silvery hair and a strong build. He's at least 50 years old and has no Valisleen. Before the events of Three Trees to Midnight, Strife was living in the woods by himself until the Dalish found him. He joined their clan, known as the Morlin clan, and picked up what he could from them. Now, I've got my own theory on this clan and Strife's ties to the Executors. If you're interested in a full exploration of that, check out my most recent theory video, linked in the description down below. But during Three Trees to Midnight, Strife was taken captive by the Qunari Antam. He escaped their grasp with the help of Tevinter Mage Mirian and elven shapeshifter Irulen. Together, they all fled into the Arlafan Forest, making their way back to the Morlan clan, ending Three Trees to Midnight and acting as a start to Ruins of Reality. So, while we don't know where Mirian has gone, Ruins of Reality followed Strife and Irulen in the cursed Arlafan Forest, tasked with an expedition to acquire a relic that belonged to their Dalish clan, the Morlin clan. The story started with Strife dodging tree branches and serrated leaves as he realized something had gone wrong in Arlafan Forest. Strife had spent the past couple of days heading north, only to be directed south. He hadn't seen the sun rise or set, and his trusted map that had every crack and corner of the forest could no longer be trusted. The Arlafan Forest had somehow stretched, transforming itself against Strife's every movement, throwing obstacles and tricking the silver-haired elf. Across the forest, Strife witnessed a reflection of himself, scrambling through the branches, dodging the bloodthirsty forest with a familiar urgency. Another him. His reflection glanced at a leather-bound journal, the same journal that our real Strife was holding. This journal was a relic of the Morlin clan, handed down over generations. The Morlin keeper had given this journal to Strife, when it suddenly started rewriting itself last month. Mysterious entries appeared of their own accord, describing sacred ruins in Arlafan Forest that guarded an artifact of fabled power. Strife was looking at this exact fabled artifact of power, as was his double. Both of them were transfixed by this relic, a statue of the elven goddess Gillinan holding a crystal Hala figurine, exactly as the journal described. Irulen arrived at the scene transformed as a wolf, sizzling with magical energy. She told Strife that the reflection wasn't real. It was like a mirage or an echo. The same thing had happened to her yesterday. She saw a pack of wolves that turned out to all be her. Strife was confused. He could have sworn that he saw Irulen just an hour ago. Irulen exclaimed that it had been 4 days since she last saw Strife. She shouted for Strife to go left, quickly. Strife ran left and so did his echo, which drew the attention of the Sylvans. The plan was to act as a lure. As Strife continued running, Irulen told him he's got a spare. She'll meet him back at the camp as she shapeshifted into an enormous eagle. Irulen swooped in and grabbed this figurine with her eagle talons, tearing the crystal Hala figurine from the statue of Gillinan's grip. Irulen disappeared into the sky with this relic, and just like that, the other Strife disappeared. The Sylvans fell silent and the spell was broken. But Strife knew an omen when he saw one. Something had gone wrong in Arlafan Forest. Dun dun dun! That marks the end of this story, but hold your horses, the artwork of Ruins of Reality revealed a beautiful piece set in the Arlafan Forest, as Strife looked over a ravine with the illusion of himself chasing through the forest looking for this relic. Irulen's silhouette can also be seen from behind, approaching Strife, just like in this story before they tricked the illusions and acquired this relic. Before we move on, something huge that I have noticed about this art piece is Strife's robes. He's wearing a mysterious cloak equipped with the Executor's emblem. Again, I've already made an entire 18-minute theory about this, but it would seem that Strife has ties to the Executors, or the Morlan clan have ties to the Executors, or if he has simply just found an Executor robe and has no clue about its origin, but likes it because it's comfortable and cozy. It's surely going to be a mystery that must be uncovered in the future. With that explored, I'm certainly curious about when we'll next see Strife and Irulen, and whereabouts Mirian is. I'd love to see how they're all connected to the greater picture of Dragon Age 4's narrative. But let's move on to the next story. The Wake by Mary Kirby regarded members of the Antivan Crows grieving the loss of a friend. This story also revolved around Tevinter Nights characters. However, this time they were from two different stories. I'll briefly go over each of them before we get to dissecting this story, just so we're all on the same page. I'll start with Tia Cantori, or as I'm going to call her, Tia Cantori, and Viago de River from 8 Little Talons. So, in 8 Little Talons, 5th Talon, Viago, and 7th Talon, Tia thwarted 4th Talon Emil Cortez's scheme to eliminate the leaders of the Antivan Crows, known as Talons, and occupy a, quote, peaceful Qunari invasion of Antiva. While this Qunari deal was broken, Emil successfully killed 3 Talons of the Crows. He was then later killed by Viago, Tia, Bolivar, and Katerina, altogether stacking up to 4 Talons killed in this story. In preparation for this Qunari invasion, Viago and Tia headed to Antiva City to inform the royals about this imminent war, while the remaining Crows planned to recruit more Talons for their ranks. With Tia and Viago headed to Antiva City, we've got to look at Lucanis and Ilario Dellamorte from the Wigmaker job. Master assassins of the Antivan Crows, Lucanis and Ilario Dellamorte are the grandchildren of Caterina Dellamorte, the first Talon. Lucanis is considered the heir to the first Talon of the Crows, considering he is Caterina's personal favourite. However, Lucanis would rather Ilario take his place as first Talon. In the Wigmaker job, the two Crows went to the Tevinter city Verantium, both contracted to assassinate Amboros Forfex, Tevinter's premier Wigmaker and high-ranking Venatori blood mage. After fulfilling this contract and stacking up to around 40 deaths, Lucanis was known by the rest of the Venatori as the Demon. Towards the end of the story, the two cousins spoke about Lucanis becoming the first Talon. However, Lucanis insisted that death is his calling, and Ilario's is to become the first Talon. Even so, that is not Lucanis's call to make. Only Caterina Dellamorte can decide who will take her place. At the very end, Venatori Malefica, Zara Renata, and her Venatori agents were revealed as antagonistic threats against Lucanis. They plan to exploit every one of Lucanis's flaws until the demon is defeated, perhaps foreshadowing Lucanis's potential murderer. With those 4 characters briefly uncovered, the Dragon Age Day short story The Wake furthered both these stories' plots, as Ilario, Viago, and Tia mourned the loss of Lucanis Dellamorte in House Cantori's casino in Antiva City. The story began with a drunken Ilario slung over Viago's shoulder, reflecting fondly on a time when Lucanis was 10. He was reading books about wyverns, and suddenly that's all Lucanis began to talk about. Wyverns all the damn time. The pair were walking through Tia's casino. It was empty. The rooms were furnished with black velveteen and lavish floral arrangements of crystal grace for parting and embryum to ease a sorrowful heart. No matter the sweet smells, they weren't enough to cover Ilario's wafting stench of liquor. Ilario continued his reflection. When he was 10, he was covered in prickle burns. He stuck to everything he touched. Lucanis was nothing but mud from ears down. Their grandmother, Caterina, was speechless. As Ilario laughed, he collapsed onto the stairs, taking Viago with him. Viago cursed under his breath. He wished he'd gone with Plan A, drugging Ilario to sleep in the lounge and throwing a sheet over him, but Tia had swayed him otherwise. For a second, Viago had a clear vision of leaving Ilario snoring in the middle of the staircase, except Tia would kill him. While on the floor still, Ilario continued. He said that Lucanis was his cousin, but they were more like brothers. Lucanis was always getting himself into every sort of trouble, and Ilario was always right behind him. Ilario's voice grew thick with emotion. There was nobody for him to follow now. Viago sighed and levered Ilario off the steps with a slightly pained grin. As he did, Ilario spat out bitterly that it should have been him. He should be the one who's dead. Viago carried him up the last of the stairs, dragging Ilario to a bed. He dumped him like a corpse. Ilario asked Viago if he'd ever told him about the time Lucanis took him wyvern hunting. Viago wet a handkerchief with a few drops from one of his vials. He then covered Ilario's nose and mouth with the cloth, knocking him out. Viago replied, "Another time," and then he left the room. And that marks the end of this sorrowful story. I don't know about you, but I feel incredibly sorry for Ilario in this tale. Now I understand why Viago is so harsh. Returning a drunken friend home safely is not the easiest thing to do, and I can imagine imagine it's very frustrating. But my man's cousin just died. Viago could have shown a little bit more grace in my opinion. But then again, Viago is a stone cold killer, so maybe this was him being as graceful as he possibly could. In any event, I do wonder if Lucanis is actually dead. Most likely, Venatori Malefica, Zara Renata and her agents got the better of Lucanis, as they swore to kill him in the Wigmaker job. And even further, Lucanis did say to Ilario, "Death is my calling." Did he say this because he was going to fake his death? Or did he actually think his time in Thedas was going to be cut short? Especially considering he killed 40 Venatori members. Did he know someone was coming for him? Well, I think that Lucanis is faking his death from everyone so he can hide from the Venatori and eventually backstab them, quote, from the grave. Or Lucanis is actually dead, which is a much sadder fate and would mean that Ilario would be the next first Talon following his grandmother Katarina. Definitely another mystery going ahead to be answered either in more short stories or in the next game. Maybe when we meet these characters and they just straight up tell us, yeah, Lucanis is dead. The artwork of this story revealed Tia, Viago and a drunken Ilario atop the city heights of Antiva, surrounded by beautiful structures. Also, as a quick FYI, we did actually see Viago and Tia in Dragon Age Deception, so we already know what they look like. But even so, this image is beautiful. There is not much to dissect other than the fact that Antiva looks bloody beautiful. The perfect romantic destination if a Qunari invasion wasn't imminent and the crows weren't being brutally murdered. Onwards to the next story. Minrathous Shadows by Cheryl Chi is about a high-stakes game of cards that ends in a shocking revelation. This short story is one of the few that doesn't regard any characters from Tevinter Nights. However, the main character of this story is called Tarquin, and he has seemingly appeared in an Inquisition Codex entry titled Shriek. We don't know for sure, but I'm still going to investigate this one just in case. This Shriek Codex briefly explored the son of a magister named Tarquin. His entire unit was killed by Darkspawn, and Tarquin was the only survivor, and even then, he was left in the direst of states, repeating the word shriek, shriek, shriek. This codex is a part of a classified collection of studies on the Darkspawn held safely in the Imperial Library in Minrathous, available only to members of the Magisterium. So while it's not confirmed, this codex's Tarquin could be the very same as our Minrathous Shadows Tarquin. With that explored, let's bloody dive into this story. Minrathous Shadows started with Tarquin pulling up a chair to a Lady Magister's private table. She eyed his wrinkled uniform, scuffed boots, and rat-grey hat dripping with rain. She deduced that he was a Templar. Tarquin told her that he won't be here long. The Magister exhaled and summoned a dark-clad dealer for another round of cards. Tarquin felt the cards he was dealt. Crisp, never used, and edged with gold leaf. The Magister asked if Tarquin found the gold sparkle charming. He could see coins winking in his peripheral vision. She noticed and asked if that's why he's here, to earn some quick gold. Tarquin asked if that was her opening bet at a table with gold-painted cards. She raised an eyebrow. It's more than Tarquin would see in half a year as a Templar, she said, laying her cards faced up on the table. She asked if he wanted more. She'd have to like how he plays. Tarquin revealed his own hand, then pushed a slim ledger into the centre of the table. He asked about raising the stakes just a bit. The Magister wasn't sure what this ledger was, but Tarquin noticed a slight pinch in the corner of one of her eyes. Tarquin spoke up. He said he had a contract that contains financial records for the black market slave trade, including transactions with the Venatori cult. The Lady Magister chuckled, exclaiming that the Venatori were eradicated. Tarquin challenged that. He said the Magisterium still considers consorting with them treason. Treason gets the Magister exiled, titles destroyed. The Magister was annoyed. She told him he's chosen interesting cards. Her voice held an edge like a razor off wet stone. She said that perhaps Tarquin wasn't properly instructed in how this game was played. Tarquin believed he knew exactly how this game was played. What a lad. The Magister flung the rest of her cards on the table, winning the hand. She boasted, "High cards and aces, you're finished, Templar." Then she stood up and leaned over. "You dare get one over me with that play?" she said with clenched fists, the sound of a mage gathering power. She lashed out, "And you don't threaten me in my establishment." As she cast her spell, her spark hissed, sputtered, and smothered. Her hand was hung in the air with her magic countered. Tarquin smirked. "You sure this is still your establishment?" he said. The Magister turned and looked at the dark-clad dealer square in the face for the first time since she summoned found him. She stumbled. You can't be. The Viper's just a tail, she gasped. Tarquin retrieved his slim ledger from the table. Rigging the system only works if we play by your rules, he said. Tarquin leaned back into his chair and tipped his hat at the Magister. Sunsets beautiful in Minrathous. Might want to catch one while you still can. The Magister questioned what Tarquin wanted. Gold? Power? Tarquin smirked. He said, we are the Tevinter. You forgot. What do we want? From behind the Magister, this dealer, known as the Viper, put up his hood and said everything. My word, I love the intrigue in this short story. There's great attention to detail. It so subtly tells us so much. Most crucially, it would seem that we have a newly introduced resistance movement amidst Tevinter's capital city. One with ties to the Tevinter that many have forgotten, run by a myth known as the Viper, seemingly against slavery in the city. Also, we can confirm that they are not the Venatori, given their hostile intentions with this Magister who was provoked by Venatori-related black market intel. Perhaps the Viper's network is related to the Tevinter Sakari, a spy network introduced in Tevinter Nights. It would seem that both factions share this espionage in Minrathous allure. Equally, they both could be completely independent from each other. Either way, it's going to be exciting witnessing the future of the Viper's network and their potential uprising. The artwork of Minrathous Shadows showcased this dealer known as the Viper, shuffling cards for this high-stakes game. Behind the Viper are many robed figures lined up, ready for whatever they have in store for Tevinter. Overall, this image is super creepy, and it shows off Tevinter's eccentric gothic fashion sense, and I freaking love it. Anyhow, moving on to the next story. The Flame Eternal by Sylvia Fekadekudi explored a pair of necromancers investigating what torments a distressed inhabitant of the Grand Necropolis. We're jumping back to one of my most excited destinations, Nevarra, and more specifically, the Mortalitasi's Grand Necropolis. Now, unlike every story, the Flame Eternal immediately established its setting. The Flame Eternal was set 30 years ago in 922 Dragon. This means that the current present would be 952 Dragon, 8 years after Trespass's events. So, is this going to be Dragon Age 4's current setting, or is something else going to happen in 952 Dragon that is related to this story? Well, we don't really know, and we're just going to have to wait and see on that front. This story kicked off with Mortalitasi necromancer Johanna Hezenkoss approaching her associate Emmerich Volcarin in the Cobalt Estuary of the Grand Necropolis. She caught a look at a hissing monster of bone and dried gristle. She cast a spell and the monster was ripped apart. Frustrated, Johanna asked Emmerich why he'd taken her away from her experiment. Rather pretentiously, Emmerich adjusted his collar pin and told Johanna to wait a moment. Fine, Johanna said, while scowling at the skull cradled in Emmerich's hand. This skull had started screaming, and I mean ceaselessly screaming, inside its place at the necropolis. An unrested demon, no doubt. An attendant had taken notice of the skull's behaviour, then informed the Morn Watch and sent out a pair of necromancers. And lo and behold, Johanna and Emmerich. Emmerich placed this screaming skull on a plinth. He wondered what insights on the dead this demon had. Johanna interrupted and said that Emmerich had already told her about his paper. Emmerich, in his fury of devotion, questioned what sort of passion drives one's spirit above the rest. What tangle of thoughts and heart returned this soul? Johanna called his questions mawkish drivel. Emmerich said that she must admit it's an interesting variation on possession. Johanna believed that the demon possessing the skull was only a petty spirit, too weak to become a demon. She lit the passage ahead of her with a flick of her wrist. The demon twisted up, and Johanna threw another spell. The demon gnashed its teeth and collapsed into itself. She told Emmerich that this demon should be safe for his corpse whispering now. Emmerich closed his eyes. His whispers vibrated the air. He asked the demon, by breath and shadow, by endless night, what haunts you? The skull's sockets flared green. It said, divided, cold. 2 graves where there should be 1. Johanna called its response twaddle. Emmerich chastised her. He cleared his throat and returned to the skull. What will grant you rest? He asked the demon. The demon responded, take this one, to sunken black walls by silver flames. Johanna complimented Emmerich's talent and his command of subastral manifestation, then asked, what does this wailing nuisance want down in the Crescent Fane? The pair arrived at the Crescent Fane. Emmerich placed the skull next to the body of an old woman, crowned with with white roses in a coffin ringed by bowls of silver fire. The skull's screaming stopped. Mathilda, the demon said. Emmerich smiled. Your wife left gently in her sleep last midnight. The records confirm she also wished to be interred together. You will not be parted again, he said. They heard a sigh. Did the old woman's mouth quirk, or was that the dancing flames? Johanna snorted. All that fury, ending in another grave? Emmerich questioned that. He thought it would be rather fine to possess such an enduring affection. Masterful pun there, Emmerich. He remarked that Johanna did see this through to the end with him though. Someone had to endure you weren't beheaded while chattering with the dead, she snapped back. Emmerich said that he was so grateful for enduring friendships. Johanna barked back. The two made their way back up the Grand Acropolis in companionable silence. And that marks the end of this story. I absolutely love the chemistry between Emmerich and Johanna. It's perfect. Emmerich is so pretentious and Johanna is just the complete opposite. It makes for some hilarious dialogue. I'm super eager to see more of their friendship grow, if it is continued of course in the next Dragon Age. It's also just fascinating to see more of the Mortalitasi, this culture that they've got, and how they can actually just put demons to sleep like that. We caught a glimpse of that in Down Among the Dead Men in Tevinter Nights, and just even more of that here. I love the exploration of this necromantic faction and their potential involvement in the future. Definitely probably one of my favourite stories tied with Minrathous Shadows here. The artwork of the Flame Eternal revealed the two necromancers speaking to this demon through this summoning ritual that Emmerich performed on this skull. Beautiful green imagery matching the iconic green aesthetic of the Grand Acropolis that's been witnessed in concept art so far. Anyhow, let's move on to the final short story. Won't Know When by Brianna Batty explored two Grey Wardens deciding their future together. So, you all remember Evka and Antoine from Hunger and the next one, right? Well, we've got another story regarding their adventure since Hunger's events. The story started with Warden Evka Ivo laying against the rough stone having killed an ogre. The beast had half a dozen arrows protruding from its throat, but it was Evka's dwarven hammer that gave the final blow. From above her, Warden Antoine told Evka that the miners made it out of the cave, proving that Evka Ivo is certainly saving the next ones since Warden Lawrence's death. Antoine lay on the ground next to Evka. The two stared up together at the shadowed cave ceiling. We made it too, Antoine said while fidgeting with a stone. This time, Evka added. The pair laughed about the last time they killed an ogre and it nearly took Antoine's head. He almost blew himself up with an experimental concoction he came up with. Evka recalled the darkspawn they fought outside Castle, a settlement in the Anderfels. The darkspawn's presence had poisoned the water, making the villagers sick. Evka also was sick, but despite that, she killed the darkspawn while Antoine stopped the spread. Evka had told Antoine that he owed her soup. I think this next memory is a reference to Hunger. Not sure though, but Evka mentioned the demon that they fought in the Medain, which is another region in the Anderfels, east of the city Nordbotten. Antoine said that he hated demons. Evka didn't think that that demon liked him either. The pair had reflected on a time when they were reading a mystery book on their travels. They got to the last chapter before it burned away. Anton continued reminiscing. He said he fared way better than Evka against those Hurlocks in the High Reaches, which is a landscape in Tevinter close to the Antivan forest, which really shows how far the pair have came since their travels in Hunger. They've actually gone outside the Anderfels. Evka said there was barely a scar since she was attacked, but didn't know exactly what bit her. Antoine put his hand on his shoulder. He said he didn't know what it was either, but they made it. Close as they were, they're still here. And very much like Charlie Brown and Snoopy, Evka pointed out that there really are a lot of ways wardens can die. And in contrast, Antoine said that there are a lot of days that they just keep on living too. In that moment, Evka dropped a bombshell that Warden Durnall went on his calling. Antoine fell silent. He didn't know that about Durnall. Durnall apparently hadn't been that old, but the blight in his blood told him it was the end. Evka had walked him to the deep roads one last time. Being a warden kills you one way or the other, and we won't know when for either of us, Evka said. I'm not afraid if you aren't, Antoine replied. Evka could sense the darkspawn moving through the caves. They still had time, but not long before they had to move. Ask me again, Evka said. Antoine faced Evka and said, Evka Ivo, will you marry me? Evka said yes and kissed him. Ah, that romantic end marks the start of a beautiful tragic love affair, and the final story dissected in this video. I can already sense the tension between their love affair and having darkspawn blood calling you to die at any given notice, plus the strenuous duties of being a warden anyway. That's like what, a 20-30 year lifespan? They've already got an incredibly tight rope to follow, but that's true love, isn't it folks? Giving up everything for a chance at something special. I'm incredibly hopeful for this romance to endure and see it blossom in Dragon Age 4. I think it would be sweet to see a warden wedding. Who wouldn't want to attend that? Be that as it may, that's me being a hopeless romantic. This is BioWare, the studio of heartbreak. We're already assuming that Lucanis is dead, and these two are having a romantic conversation about death already. We're gonna have to be wary and pray to sweet Andraste that Evka and Antoine get a happy ending. If we can't have Solavellen, can we at least give Antoine and Evka a happy ending here, please, BioWare? The artwork of this story features the two lovebirds surrounded by a heap of dead darkspawn, making a beautiful love heart around them. Honestly, so beautifully tragic, I friggin' love it. We can see Evka and Antoine right in the flesh here, and don't they look absolutely dapper? Now, we know what to expect if we come across them in Dragon Age 4. In any event, folks, that's all the Dragon Age Day short stories so far dissected. But I do have a few final thoughts to go through before I leave you. I'm going to try and run through these as quickly as possible. But each of these short stories revolve around a particular faction, which I think may mean something for the next Dragon Age. The next one revolved around Grey Wardens. Ruins of Reality was about the Executors and the Dalish Elves. The Wake was about the Antivan Crows. Minrathous Shadows was about either the Tevinter Nights or this new anti-slavery movement run by the Viper. The Flame Eternal was about the Mortalitasi and the Mournwatch, and Won't Know When was also about the Grey Wardens. This is obviously showcasing the direction the next Dragon Age is going to go in. It seems that we're going to be meeting with many major characters from Thedas' top and most relevant factions at the current moment. Perhaps these factions are also going against the Red Wolf and we're going to unite with them, or maybe we're going to have something else that is set ablaze in the realm. With that, it's certainly safe to assume that we're at least going to see a few, if not all, of these short story characters in the next game, either as small or pivotal roles. Maybe a few of them are going to be party members. For example, Evka Ivo, we have so much on her character right now. It seems like, and I say seems here, that she's going to be a huge character in Dragon Age 4 because we've got so much story on her, from her backstory to her potential future narrative. And then we have unique characters like Strife, a tall grey-haired Starkhaven elf who then has ties to the Executors. And again, so many other exciting prospects for other characters: Ilario, Tia, Viago, Emrich, Johanna. So many exciting characters that I'm already buzzing about. But of course, we do need to be wary because BioWare seemingly are already killing a few of them, like Lucanis, who at the moment seems like he's dead. We don't really know. We're just gonna have to wait, and hopefully we'll have more Dragon Age short stories in December this year to dive into. I would love another Dragon Age book to come out before the next game, but these short stories are just as satisfying for the moment. Of course, the moment we hear more about these characters, the next game, we see gameplay, you are already in the right place for all that exciting content. But anyhow, folks, thank you so much for listening to this. If you're still here right now, I greatly appreciate that you have watched this video to its entirety. Until the next one, I have been Jackdaw, and I should go. Whoa.